So it has been a little over 2 weeks since Nintendo's E3 Direct, and I know that that probably seems shocking. To me, it feels like that just happened a couple of days ago, but it has really been more than 2 weeks. And one of the biggest announcements and reveals to come out of that, we all know, was the reveal of the sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, confirmation that that game does exist, even though we all sort of really knew that anyway. And of course, we got that really sweet trailer. Now, I haven't had much of an opportunity yet on Rule of Two Review to talk to you guys about the trailer and some of my thoughts, beyond just my initial review of the Nintendo Direct as a whole, so I wanted to spend some time doing that today because, I mean, who's not excited for this game, right? This was a huge moment and a huge surprise to see. If you watched my live reaction from the actual Direct itself, I initially thought and was a little bit worried that maybe we were seeing some more DLC. And while that wouldn't have been like the worst thing in the world, I mean, that could have actually been really cool. The thing is, because they were deciding to close their show with it, I don't think anyone would have wanted to see just DLC for Breath of the Wild show up as their one last thing moment. It was way more exciting when we saw that confirmation with that text at the end that said, hey, this is the sequel. It's in development now and look for it in the future. The irony to that is that a few days after E3, IG Aonuma actually confirmed that initially this game that is the sequel to Breath of the Wild had started out as really just a bunch of DLC ideas. I think that was the initial plan, was more DLC. Or maybe a lot of the ideas that are going into Breath of the Wild 2 were supposed to be part of the initial DLC for the game, and they actually realized, hey, instead of including this as DLC, why don't we take some of this best stuff in this DLC plan and really just craft a whole new video game out of it? Let's just make this the beginning stages of the sequel. I think that's some pretty interesting stuff when you think about it. And so now that it's been a couple of weeks, like I said, we've all had time to sit on this game, think about this game, re-review the trailer, watch all these different reviews and breakdowns. And I know that we all have 1,000 ideas in our heads of what we think is happening in this game, what this trailer is trying to show us, what our own wishes and dreams and hopes for the sequel are. And that's what I wanted to do, is kind of discuss some of my own wishes and some of my own theories and just kind of talk about and speculate about this freaking massive sequel. So of all the different notes and ideas that I jotted down for myself for this video and this discussion about the sequel, I think I'm just going to start with the first and biggest thing that's been on my mind when thinking about this game. And it's something that I want to see, not necessarily something that this trailer hinted at. And it's the return of more traditional dungeons, and I know that I'm not alone. Many people have discussed that. Breath of the Wild did introduce a really awesome shakeup to the concept of dungeons and how you traverse through the game and how you deal with puzzles. And, they gave us 120 little mini shrines throughout that whole world. And it was perfect for what Breath of the Wild was, what that game was trying to do. And it was a great way and a great time to, like I said, shake up the kind of formula of what the Zelda games had been in 3D. And so, yeah, I like the shrines. I enjoyed doing that. But I'm an old school Zelda fan. I am a diehard Zelda fan. I grew up on the original game on the NES, which means I've also followed the series through all of the iterations, all the way into 3D and every single 3D game since. And I love them all. They're all great. Even Adventures of Link, I will fight you in the streets over that. That game is good. Zelda 2 is a good game, goddammit. But I still like all the games. I like all the 3D games. And the 3D games were very set in their specific formula for the dungeons and how they worked. You would have several throughout the game. They would be, themed, like a forest one, an ice one, a shadow one, a desert one, whatever the case. They all had their own kind of themes. And instead of being, as plentiful as 120 and just like really many short puzzle experiences, they were huge ordeals. They were something that once you got to one, it was a huge achievement to find it and find your way in. And as soon as you got there, you're like, man, here I am. I'm at the Forest Temple. I'm going to be here for the next 3 hours, just trying to solve all of these massive puzzles and try to get through the mini boss and then the final boss. Not to mention usually finding a new weapon or an upgrade that became essential for beating that boss, but also essential for how you would play throughout the rest of the game and the rest of the world. And it was amazing. Now, obviously, there are some goods and bads to that idea, and we also can't forget that the Divine Beasts in Breath of the Wild were certainly an attempt to also do that. And I actually think the Divine Beasts were pretty cool. They were some of my favorite parts of the game. But they weren't nearly as involved as a lot of the temples in past games have been. They weren't nearly as fun, and they weren't nearly as long. So, and they all were all very kind of samey too, to be fair. So I really think that as much as Breath of the Wild had a perfect way to change things up, I really want to see the traditional dungeon format come back, or maybe some sort of compromise between the two, and I don't really know what that would look like, because I don't think that they're going to throw in 30 to 50 actual dungeons, trying to hit that same number that Breath of the Wild had. They can't do that. So I would still like to see something where maybe they have 8 or 9 main dungeons in the next game, but maybe there's also 20 mini shrines hidden throughout the world as well. Maybe something like that is what they do. So I don't know. I'm sure that would be a lot of time and manpower to develop that kind of stuff, so I don't know if that's feasible. It's just an idea in my head, but at the end of the day, I really miss these dungeons, man. Another old school Zelda trope that I very much would like to see come back is the idea of a companion, because companions were also very hugely important in most of the 3D games. And, I think that some people might feel like, I guess there wouldn't be a way to include a companion in Breath of the Wild 2. But I don't know that I really see that or agree with that sentiment. I think that there's a way to do it. One of the big things here, this is a little bit of a theory as well as my own wish here, and this could affect the idea of a companion, is if you play as Zelda in this game. I mean, there's a lot of reason to think that Zelda might be the main protagonist or the main person that you play as, or maybe you play back and forth between Zelda and Link, and that's another thing that was kind of hinted at interviews after the Nintendo Direct, that maybe, basically, they wouldn't, confirm or deny the truth of any of that. And so we all, of course, found that to be pretty suspicious. And so if they introduce something as different as that, playing as Zelda and not Link in this game, that could affect what they do with the idea of a companion for sure. And for what it's worth, I'm just going to throw this out there. I am totally cool with playing as Zelda in this game. I think that is a great idea. And years ago, the concept of playing as Zelda or playing as a female Link before they introduced the character of Linkle was kind of a hot topic. There was a period about 2015 or 2016 where that was a big discussion, and people were pretty heated about how they felt about the idea. I'm totally okay with playing as Zelda. It's not so much that I want to play as a female Link, because I just like the Link that we already have. To me, introducing a new character that's female, kind of like Linkle, as silly as Linkle is the right idea. But playing as Zelda works to me because she's always been the focal point of the story in these games. I mean, it's called The Legend of Zelda. And so taking an already established character that is so integral to the stories in these games the way Link is, and making that person the main protagonist or a shared protagonist, I love it. I'm totally in support of that idea. I think it would be a great way to change up everything. I could see a world where people maybe push back pretty hard on it, though, so I know that it might be risky for Nintendo to do that, so I don't really know what their plans are going to be there. But I'm just open to the idea for what it's worth. That's just me. I like the idea of it. So going back to the companion idea, I just really want to see something like that brought back into the series, because as amazing, again, as Breath of the Wild was, it did feel a little lonely, if you think about it. I think that I felt lonely playing a lot of that game, and whenever I pop it back on, as much as I'm having a blast and always impressed, I'm like, man, I wish there was someone else to talk to or someone else guiding me through. I mean, when you look at characters like Midna and Fi and Navi, I mean, they're great. They don't always have the best stuff to say. Midna clearly being the standout. She felt the most real. But I still love the idea of having somebody that can talk to you as you play through the game. And now I also want to talk about this game hopefully fixing my biggest gripe with Breath of the Wild. And I know some of you are going to cheer this, and the others of you are going to groan because you love the way it was handled in Breath of the Wild. I, however, didn't love it, and that is the weapon system and the breaking of weapons. I'm not the hugest fan of that in Breath of the Wild. And I will say that it did eventually grow on me a bit. Like at first I was like, oh, this is cool, there's so many weapons. And then throughout a lot of my experience, I got annoyed at how often they broke. And I got to the point where I didn't really want to even use any weapon but the Master Sword. Because I'm also I'm a little bit OCD when it comes to resource management in video games anyway. You should watch me play Resident Evil. It'll probably drive you up a wall. I don't know how my girlfriend does it because she watches me play games a lot, and it's just crazy. And so being a resource management crazy person, it's like, man, I don't want to use any of these great weapons I have. I have these, these Lionel weapons. They're so powerful. I don't ever want to use them because I don't want them to break. And because of that, a lot of the game, I ended up just playing it, holding on to weapons and never using them just because I don't know what I was thinking. It's like they were just going to waste in my inventory. Eventually, I loosened up on that and I did start letting myself use them and I allowed them to break, and just try to find new weapons throughout the world. And I did start to enjoy it a lot more as I did that, to be fair. But at the end of the day, it still was frustrating, and while I applaud them trying to introduce a way to use a variety of weapons, which was great, because there's like 100 weapons in that game, I don't think that they totally nailed it. And so it's not so much that I maybe want them to go away from the idea of weapons breaking and introducing different weapons to play with. I think that they need to keep that and evolve it. But I think that we need some things to refine the system, such as really letting us know how close a weapon is to breaking, maybe allowing us to repair them. I think that would be actually really, really helpful. And even something that to me is kind of like a quality of life improvement, which would be allowing us to drop a weapon from the quick menu in the game. Like, I really hated that when I wanted to drop a weapon that was close to breaking, or something I picked up that I didn't want, that I had to pause and go into the menu and cycle through to the weapons thing and select it and then select drop. It kind of sounds like an entitled gamer sort of problem, but in the sense of playing video games, it was annoying to me. Like, I could already pull up a quick menu to select which weapon I wanted. Why couldn't one of the things I could do would be to also drop it from that same menu? I really, really hated that. So that's just something that I would like to see happen, And again, I love the idea that there were many weapons to use, and their system for having them break so often did encourage you to switch weapons and play with different weapons all the time. That was the right idea. And while it wasn't a totally broken system, it was flawed. And to me, I found it a lot of the times more annoying than enjoyable. And so I hope that they fix whatever they do with the weapons in the Breath of the Wild sequel. I really hope that they do something there. Now, the other thing that I think it'd be neat to see from this game is how the story is going to continue. When I think about the story, and it's tough because there really isn't a whole lot of hints that we can get from the trailer. But when I think about the story, I think something I want to see is just really strong examples of how this game connects to the overall lore of The Legend of Zelda and a lot of the previous games. And the one game I come to the most when I think about this game connecting to it, and there is a little bit of a hint that I kind of got from the trailer itself, is Skyward Sword. And I know that Skyward Sword is not a lot of people's favorite Zelda, but I think that it is the richest story. Well, Ocarina of Time is probably the best story. But I think in terms of richness and like the delivery of the story, I think Skyward Sword is still better. And they really fleshed out Zelda, and it's just the cinematics in that game, the story they were telling, the character arc of Groose. I mean, come on, man. Like, the story is phenomenal in Skyward Sword. And the inclusion of Skyloft, the fact that it's a prequel, we learn about the Master Sword, we learn about Ganon and Demise and all of that stuff. I would love to see connections to that. And now, in the middle of the trailer for Breath of the Wild 2, there's a quick flash of a silhouette of someone on the wall, like almost like screaming in agony and pain, and it's just a shadow. And I don't know if anyone out there has kind of confirmed that to be anything specific, so maybe I'm off base here. But when I look at that, it kind of looks like Demise. And so what if there's a connection to Demise, which in and of himself was also a connection to Ganon and to Ganondorf? If there's a way for whatever's happening in Breath of the Wild 2 to connect to that character, that would be incredible, because I thought Demise was a fantastic final boss, and his monologue to Link, his monologue to you really, in that final battle and how it sets up the future of all these Zelda stories was so freaking mind-blowing. I lost my mind watching it. And it was a great fight too. So I think that it'd be cool to see something like that happen. And then something else that happens in the trailer is we see what looks like Hyrule Castle like moving. To me, it looks like it's lifting out of the ground. And so what I would love to see happen is to see that thing, maybe Hyrule Castle, like, goes up into the sky. And maybe we see Skyloft again. How weird and kooky would that be? I would love to see this game take place in the sky the way Skyward Sword did, because that was one of the coolest parts about Skyward Sword. And, that might be way off base. I don't know what's happening with the Hyrule Castle thing, but part of my theory and wish for this game is that we don't play Breath of the Wild 2 in the exact same identical Hyrule map. That map, probably the best world map of any game ever, really, but we've already done it. And so just going back there for a whole nother game doesn't sound as exciting as going somewhere new. That's why Termina was such a great world to go to in Majora's Mask. And so, if Hyrule Castle moves somewhere, whether it's to the sky in Skyloft, or whether it's just somewhere else in the world, and you're on a totally different land, that's really what I hope they do with this game. Of course, the other hints that the trailer gives us is, Link and Zelda seem to be exploring probably underneath Hyrule Castle. They see that creature that I think a lot of people think is probably Ganon, and I think that might be Ganon, but I don't know how confirmed that is, but they see some sort of creature, Ganon or otherwise, who seems to be resurrected, right? And then you get all these crazy flashes. And so maybe this is like a Ganon returning. Maybe this is like a different enemy that they're discovering. And they awaken this new evil that becomes the big main plight and antagonist for the game. That all looks and sounds really great to me. I'm completely on board. I do want to talk about the very first shots of the trailer where you see that kind of like spindly, swirly stuff that seems to be feeding down into that creature, or Ganon, whatever it is. And that stuff to me looks very similar to some of the stuff we see in the Twilight Realm in Twilight Princess. And again, that could also be way off base, but there's no doubt in my mind that the aesthetic of Twilight Princess seems very apparent in that. And I like the idea. I think Twilight Princess, another great game. I mean, what a shocker. All the Zelda games are great. So if there's any way to maybe connect this game also to the Twilight Realm, that would be cool. We'd get that connection to Twilight Princess. Maybe that opens the door for Midna to come back. I mean, I'm really fanboy dreaming at that point because that's not going to happen. But, it's interesting to think about. I guess it's not impossible. So, there's glimpses of things in the trailer that make me think maybe there's a connection to Skyward Sword. There's glimpses of things that make me think maybe there's a connection to Twilight Princess. And who knows what else they could do. They might want to just continue this and make it feel like its own thing that's only connected to Breath of the Wild. And that would be totally fine. But I can tell you guys right now, I would totally lose my mind with excitement if this somehow feels like it's connected to the larger Zelda universe at hand, because that's, to me, just the coolest stuff. The last thing I wanted to briefly touch on is more on the technical level, and something that I think could be pretty cool. And it's the fact that we can probably expect this game to be a better looking, better running, better sounding, and better feeling game overall. And it's because Breath of the Wild, we all know, that was originally built for the Wii U. So as amazing as that game is, and as much of a technical achievement as it is, regardless of the platform, at the end of the day, that game technically was hindered by what is now previous generation hardware, the Wii U, which is not nearly as capable as the Nintendo Switch. This sequel, we know, yes, it's using the same engine, but it's also being built on the ground up for the Nintendo Switch, right? So I think we're going to see just a better overall game experience from all of the different technical aspects. And in my opinion, looking at the models and the animation and everything that this trailer showed us, I already think that's the case. I mean, if you compare the couple of shots we see of Link and Zelda in this game, in this trailer, to, cinematics of them in Breath of the Wild as we know it, they don't look the same. I think that the quality of visuals and animations and lighting and shadow is vastly superior to what it looks like in Breath of the Wild. And now, you guys know I'm not an expert on this stuff, so maybe someone like a Digital Foundry or someone else can really scrub through this and prove that completely wrong. So I'll put that disclaimer out there. Maybe I'm wrong. But what my eye sees, what my brain feels when I look at the trailer, is that it looks better. And to me, that tracks simply because, like I said, this is being built on the Switch. It's not being built on the Wii U. And so whatever this game is going to do, wherever it's going to take us, whatever adventure we're going to experience, I think it's going to look, sound, and play better than the already masterful and perfect Breath of the Wild as we know it. So that's a lot of my discussion for now. The real big question is, when is it going to come out? When are we going to play this game? How long have they been working on it? Did they start it before they completed and released the DLC? Did they start it after they completed and released the DLC? Were they working on it even in tandem with the final hours of completing Breath of the Wild? I mean, maybe development goes that far back. Who even knows? But it seems like they had a lot to show us in that trailer. So there could be a lot already completed on this game. Maybe it's something that's meant to release in 2021 or something. I think that could be crazy. Is it going to be something where they do a dual release and maybe they release it on the next console, just like they did with Breath of the Wild. I don't know, man. I mean, I already have my theories of 2022 for the next machine, and I already have my theories that Metroid Prime 4 is going to launch that machine within the first year. You know, maybe be a cross-generational launch there. Would they do the same with the next Zelda, with Breath of the Wild 2? Maybe, maybe not, you know. Heck, what are they even going to call this game? Are they going to call it Breath of the Wild 2? I would think not. They're probably going to give it a completely different name, so that's going to be the other mystery. I mean, think about it. For the next 2 years, we're all going to be calling this game Breath of the Wild 2 until Nintendo finally tells us the title. Just like we called, you know, the Switch, the NX, forever until they tell us it's the Switch. And the same with Zelda. We called it just Zelda, just Wii U Zelda, until they finally showed us Breath of the Wild. So I don't know, man. It's just an exciting time. God damn it. I just love that Nintendo's making this game. I can't believe we already have another Zelda game being made, and we've already seen a glimpse at it, and it's so exciting. I really hope that this is a game set for 2021. 2020 might be too lofty of a goal. I don't know if we should get hyped for next year. I'm going to, right now, just put my chips on 2021, but that may change as Nintendo shows us more and more of this game, and so who knows? I could be wrong there. So anyway, that's what's going on. Those are some of my theories and predictions and wish lists for Breath of the Wild 2 based on the little bit of stuff that we know right now. What do you guys think? Do my theories and suggestions make sense? Are they things that line up with what you want to see and what you think is going to happen? Or do you think totally different stuff? You know, definitely feel free to share whatever it is you think is happening, what you want to see in this game. Because it's Zelda, and it's time to get hyped for Zelda. So with that, this video is a wrap. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Roll Up to Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.